Speaking of the White House, apparently regulations regarding train safety were changed during the Trump administration. This particular railroad and others lobbied President Trump to dismantle an Obama-era rule that would have required railroads to update their braking systems. And apparently the Obama administration had pushed for it to govern transportation of hazardous materials after about 500,000 barrels of crude were dumped. But ultimately, the Trump administration undid that and said the costs exceeded the benefits.
That voice you're hearing is Fox and Friends host Steve Doocy calling out Trump on air for his administration's handling of regulations that led to the kinds of derailments and chemical spills that have happened lately. The fact is that Trump made deregulation a hallmark of his presidency, even going so far as to hold ribbon-cutting ceremonies for himself, because of course he did, for the accomplishment of making our lives just that much more dangerous.
Together, let's cut the red tape. Let's set free our dreams, and yes, let's make America great again. And one of the ways we're going to do that is by getting rid of a lot of unnecessary regulation. Thank you very much. Thank you. Come on over here, Chris. Come on over here. Why don't we all gather around? Come on. You're all such a big part of this. Come on, I think we can all make it. So this is what we have now. This is where we were in 1960. And when we're finished, which won't be in too long a period of time, we will be less than where we were in 1960, and we will have a great regulatory climate.
Just imagine for a moment if a doctor told you they never tested for the side effects of the medicine that they just prescribed you. Imagine if a builder told you that the inspector never checked your home. Imagine if your car dealer said they never did safety tests on your vehicle. Would any of that be okay? No? Then why in the world is deregulation being celebrated by Republicans when the practical effect of it is to make you decidedly less safe? And of course the answer is that they're framing it as some win for you when the win is actually for the owners or manufacturers that don't have to spend extra money on pesky little things like upgraded equipment or safety checks. And so they get to hoard more money, which they'll then use to donate to more Republicans, who will in turn help them save more money, and on this vicious cycle goes, all the while the losers in this situation are regular people who are now less safe, all because a billionaire railroad owner needed more money. But sure, a real win for Americans. Got it. And of course, what's most sad is that it took an event like the derailment at East Palestine to get everyone to recognize that all of this deregulation has serious consequences. But by now, it's already too late. Donald Trump spent the majority of his time in office slashing regulations with regard to transportation, to trains, to inspections, to chemical spills, water contaminants in industrial facilities. And so while East Palestine is rightfully in the news right now, let's not overlook just how many other disasters are happening because a company was able to skirt the rules, and all of it was sanctioned by a government that somehow thinks that deregulation is something to brag about. There's something especially sick, especially insidious, about a political party whose job it is to regulate big business, instead getting into bed with those people while you end up screwed. And yet Republicans view that as some badge of honor, that they are literally throwing themselves ceremonies for doing it. And it's not just Trump. Just this past week, Ted Cruz took to Twitter writing, "Texas is booming. We need to move the rest of the country in the direction of low taxes and low regulation." Not only is it so aggressively tone-deaf to applaud deregulation on the same week that this train derailment owned the entire news cycle, but the guy is coming from the one state that's own deregulation has left its own citizens without power over and over again. Texas's deregulated power grid is exhibit A, B, and C for why regulation might be great for a billionaire owner and really shitty for the hundreds of thousands or millions of customers that rely on that company's service. In fact, when Texas suffered that blackout in February of 2021, in which 5 million homes were left without power in the freezing cold while contending with jaw-dropping power bills, a company called Energy Transfer Partners pulled in $2.4 billion that year, tens of millions of which came from that one storm in particular. And the company's multi-millionaire owner, Kelsey Warren, gave $1 million to Greg Abbott's campaign, his single largest campaign donation ever. But hey, I'm sure these guys are all just looking out for Texas's best interest and not trying to fuck them over from every angle to make as much money as humanly possible. So while I'm certainly glad that one lone Fox host managed to summon the courage to acknowledge objective reality about Trump's sordid history of deregulation, let's not kid ourselves into thinking that the propagandists at the network are ready to start embracing the truth. Because for every one segment like this one, where Steve Doocy deigns to recognize the effects of deregulation, you've got 100 segments like this one by Tucker Carlson, where somehow this is all just an attack on white people.
East Palestine is overwhelmingly white, and it's politically conservative. More than 70% of the voters in the surrounding county supported Donald Trump in the last election. That shouldn't be relevant, but as you're about to hear, it very much is. Imagine if this had happened in, well, the favored cities of Philadelphia and Detroit. If this affected the rich or the favored poor, it would be the lead of every news channel in the world. But it happened to the poor, benighted town of East Palestine, Ohio, whose people are forgotten and, in the view of the people who lead this country, forgettable.
Because lest you think otherwise, there's nothing you can't turn into a culture war. And that's a point, by the way, that Pete Buttigieg wasted no time in calling out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where Tucker Carlson was when they were trying to dismantle the EPA, which is now maybe the main thing standing between the people of East Palestine and ecological disaster. Look, they're always ready to take it back to race. But the reality is that we're going to serve everybody. That's how this administration works. We're not out there to bring resentment. We're out there to bring results. And what our focus was today, and our focus, by the way, from the first hours when we had our Department of Transportation personnel on the ground, from those very first hours in this response all the way through today and well into the future, for as long as it takes. Focus is to make sure that people get the information they need, the support that they need, and the accountability that is needed for corporations like Norfolk Southern to clean up this mess. There is a long pattern of voices like that in the ideological media, let's call it that, trying to pit people against each other, only to turn around and support policies that are especially hard on working class and low income people of every race.
So if Republicans want to predicate their campaigns on deregulation, that's their prerogative, but they should be prepared to answer for the actual effects of their actions. And while they may pretend that this train derailment is somehow a win for Republicans because they get to whine about how it took Pete Buttigieg a few days to show up there, he likely wouldn't have ever needed to show up in the first place if Republicans weren't so hell-bent on making our industries less safe for consumers. But hey, those campaign checks from billionaires gotta get written somehow. The derailment in East Palestine is just the price that Republicans are willing to pay to cash them. Before you go, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. You can click the thumbnail right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work even further, the best way is to subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. There you can check out my interviews with major players in the world of politics, including President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Katie Porter, Jamie Raskin, and so many more. Plus other interviews that live exclusively on the podcast. That link is also right here on this screen, or just search No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen wherever you listen to podcasts.